Going over autism, ADHD, ODD, and OCD. Most of you guys are going to know what those are, but that's why I put these out there, okay? We're going to go over, I tried to organize it as best I could. We're going to go over the what is it, where in the brain are we seeing changes? And the reason I do that is because I need you guys to see that it's not just characteristics that these people have. It's actually changes in their brain. So when we're dealing with a child like that in our classroom, we can't just fight brain structure. So when we are like to an autistic child or an ADHD child, you need to calm down, you need to start freaking out, stop freaking out. It doesn't work because it's their brain and we can't fight the brain. So that's why I always include the brain in there and the more scientific stuff. We're going to look at when the characteristics start to show, what age and what those characteristics are, and how you can help, which is the most important part of it all. The inspiration for this training is that I hear these disorders a lot at Kitty Corner. And we have these students here, and I feel like it's important for us to know what's up with these different disorders. So the most important part of this training is to remember we cannot diagnose. And that means even say your director walks in the room, you have a new child, and you say, I'm pretty sure this child's autistic. That we don't know a lot about autism, okay? But it has been shown that these children can understand what we're saying. So we never want to put that label on a child in front of them and in front of the parent. But most importantly, I think it happens where we assume that this child maybe is so spacey that they don't take in what we say in front of them. But the thing is we don't know. Now, I can tell you with ADHD children, ODD and OCD, they are definitely taking in what we're saying. With autism, I don't know if you guys have seen, it's not included in this training, but where you can take even a severely autistic child, and there is a form of typing they can do. And what comes out of their mind is just like we would talk. However, they can't get it out. So always be aware of that. Don't be judging them because we don't label. We're beyond that. We're not judgmental people, right? And so the way to handle it is you're expressing details to the parents, all right? So not a label, but if you've ever had to fill out like a child abuse form, you can never be subjective. You can't say, it looks like that somebody burnt him with a cigarette. It looks like somebody's handprints are on his arm. You have to say there is a 1 inch bruise that is 1/4 of an inch wide, 4 marks on the arm. So that's what we need to do when we're talking to the parents about their child. If there's something we want to go to them about, we don't say, I'm seeing autistic characteristics. I think that your child's hyperactive. We're going to say, when I tell your child directions, it seems that they can't hear me. Sometimes children have hearing problems. And so is it autism or is it deafness? We don't know. So we tell them exactly what happened. We wouldn't say, your child can't sit still, he's hyperactive. We would say, I've noticed that your child's body needs to move most of the time. That's an objective statement that you are not judging. It's hard to get mad at that, right? It's hard to place blame on someone. we were here. So we do not say your child is bad. We describe those behaviors. We are qualified to refer to someone who is qualified. So make sure you're familiar with local agencies. And if you're not, those of you who have a CDA book, all of your referral information would be in there. Also, before you report a behavior to a parent, we are going to try to remember what a behavior actually is. We're going to go back to that last month's training. Remember, if it's age appropriate, it's not a behavior. If it is not affecting someone's health or safety, it might be an annoyance, but it's not a behavior that you would report to a parent. Just because a child is hyper that day, that's age appropriate. We're looking for changes in something that is a health and safety issue. Autism spectrum disorder. I love this quote, and it's something we should all live by. If they cannot learn the way that we are teaching, then we must teach the way that they learn. And that should be for every child, not just autistic children, but especially for autistic children. Don't dismiss them. So this is where we're getting into the things that can kind of put you to sleep. So I'm going to summarize. Autism spectrum disorder. Okay, it's a verbal and nonverbal communication problem where social interaction is affected. It usually comes on by the age of 3, and it does affect a kid's performance in education. You see those repetitive activities, those movements, they do not do well with changes in routines, and sometimes, a lot of the times, have a hard time with responding to sensory stuff. I feel that you will not be able to hear this lady. However, what I would like to do is click on her. And if you cannot hear her, I ask you, please go to your YouTube, type in Temple Grandin, the autistic brain, and watch the first 4 minutes and 30 seconds, I believe, of her speech. Okay. I ask for you to do that in the hour remaining. This lady is fantastic. There is a movie out where I believe Cameron Diaz plays her. I could be, nope. It's not Cameron Diaz, but it's one of those real popular actors. And it's fascinating and a true story. Okay, so we are going to do this. If you can't hear it, just go watch it later.
Well, it's really great to be here today. Got lots of things to talk about today in a pretty short period of time. And I think I'll just start out and talk about, what exactly autism is. It's a developmental disorder. It's a very, very big continuum. Now, the thing is, when does something of just normal variation become an abnormality? For example, people with bipolar have more siblings in creative careers, and people with autism have more relatives in technical careers. If we got rid of all of the genetics that makes autism, well, you wouldn't even have any computers. You wouldn't have any electricity. I mean, who do you think made the first stone spear? It wasn't the social yakety-yaks around the campfire, that's for sure. See, the thing is, is a little bit of these traits can provide an advantage. You get too much of the trait, then you get a disadvantage. You see, that's the problem. It isn't like having tuberculosis where you either have it or you don't. I just got back from Australia and I had to check off on the customs form whether or not it had tuberculosis. And I could definitely say no. You see, that is something that's absolutely definitive. Now the thing is, what would happen to little Albert today? Little Dr. Einstein had no speech until age 3. He would have been diagnosed autistic in a lot of school systems. What would happen to him? It makes me really, really worried. Fortunately, somebody let him develop his abilities. I think a job at the patent office was a good thing because he got exposed to lots and lots of new ideas. What about Steve Jobs? Yep, he was a loner. He brought snakes to school. He didn't have any friends. And one of the things that fixed him, that really helped him, was the local kids' computer club. When he was in high school, he got in to do computers with other students, and this really helped him because the only place I had friends was where there was shared interests. Okay, autism is a very, very big spectrum. It's not precise. It's a behavioral profile. You see, and it varies all the way from someone like Einstein, Silicon Valley. Half of Silicon Valley's got a bit of the spectrum. They tend to avoid the labels. And then you've got, on the other end of the spectrum, somebody very, very severe. You see, it's a huge spectrum. It's a much bigger spectrum than something like dyslexia. Now, when I worked on my book, The Autistic Brain, when we looked at the history of diagnosis, it was kind of shocking how much things have changed. You know, nobody's changing the diagnosis of tuberculosis. It's still pretty much the same. Yes, there's resistant strains now we got to worry about, but it's still tuberculosis. Where in 1950 and 1970, they blamed mothers, you know, the psychoanalytic approach. Then in 52, they were mixing up autism with schizophrenia. This is the American Psychiatric Association. You see, the problem is these labels are half science and the other half is doctors squabbling around conference room tables. And 1968, they just mentioned autism. It just sort of barely got mentioned. And then in 1980, they finally came up with a definite diagnosis where you had to have speech delay and other, obviously, autistic behaviors. In 1987, they added PDD-NOS, pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified. Well, what is that? 1994, they added Asperger's, where now if you're just a geek and a nerd and you're socially awkward, you now get an autism diagnosis because you no longer had to have speech delay. Well, now in 2013, they decided to take out the Asperger's, and now the whole thing is very muddied because what about the speech delay and the abnormal language? Well, that's all kind of blurred now. Then they started a new diagnosis called social communication disorder, and they're trying to say that's not autism. Well, what do you think the core problem is in autism? It's socially awkward. It's sort of like you take out some social circuits in the brain, you end up with geek circuits to do all the fun geek stuff. Now, the genetics is complicated. It's not a simple thing. You know, lots of little tiny code.
I hope you were able to hear that. And if you were not, please go watch it. She's amazing and she explains everything. Okay, now we are into the changes of the brain that I only present to you to make you see that we can't fight the brain. I will just go over the basics here. The hippocampus in autistic people is larger than in normal people, or what would you call it? Typical neurodevelopment. This hippocampus is responsible for forming and storing memories. Autistic children also have enlarged amygdalas. So the amygdala is responsible for emotion. I'm sure you've gotten that. I'm trying to help here, guys. Sorry. Also, there is decreased amounts of brain tissue in parts of the cerebellum. There we go. That helps. That brain's outer layer, there's a different pattern of thickness. And also people who lack this stuff called white matter in the corpus callosum, which is the part of our brain that connects the brain's two hemispheres, They have a likelihood of being autistic or having those traits. Then we see scientists are describing it as a connectedness syndrome. That's because they're seeing disconnects in the nervous system. Think about that for a minute. If our body has disconnects in the nervous system, how can a teacher beat that? So we have to change us, because guys, they are not changing just because you say, stop doing that. So that disconnect, it can be all kinds of different things. You're going to see it. You could see it in their communication, their social life, emotional life, and even in their movement. It could be one of those things or all four of those things. So what we're seeing is a huge percentage of symptoms are shown before 12 to 18 months, okay? 30% of symptoms occurred between 14 and 24 months. In other words, it's almost always by age 2. So there's a great study. It's an eye tracking study that's really popular by Dr. Klein. 12 babies who had siblings that were diagnosed with ASD, which is autism spectrum disorder. All right, try to follow me here. Between 2 to 6 months, levels of eye contact were decreasing, just like the babies who would go on to develop autism. All right, so what we're talking about here is typical neurodevelopment and those who went on to develop autism. They all had a decrease in eye contact. But then at 18 months old, those neurotypical children had a course correction and the levels of eye contact were increasing. Whereas the children that went on to later be diagnosed with autism, there was no increase there at 18 months. These results suggest that there's an early period, and they have put it at 9 months old, where we as teachers and parents of children showing autistic signs, we have an opportunity to get in there and do early treatment and intervention. And what they've seen is that children, if it can be spotted by 9 months old and they get intervention and early treatment, they are seeing a course correction for a large number, a significant number. When I say course correction, I do not mean that they no longer show autistic traits. What I mean is they saw better outcomes in the children with early intervention. It seems at 9 months, there's an opportunity for intervention and it could change the outcomes, right? So this is why it's so important for us as teachers to know these early signs and remember how to present it to the parent. Not, I think your child is autistic, but objective statements. Early signs that we see birth to 12 months. Delayed joint attention. So what that is they do not engage anyone with their eye contact, with gestures, or just the cooing. So you see a lot in the infant room, children who babble with you and look in your eyes. Okay, so if someone can let whoever just is talking know that sound is messed up because of the rain. Check chat. Check chat. Oh, I feel so silly. Okay, no babbling. And we see a limited range of sounds, no pointing or gesturing, a lack of a social smile, no response to a name, difficulty with imitation, and then they have those odd manipulations of objects. They do different things with the objects. I want to cover this first. All toddlers with autism display the following characteristics: impaired conversation, adherence to routine, which means they do not adhere to the routine, delayed and impaired joint attention. They're not looking you in the eye. They're not babbling. And that stereotyped language. All of the early signs for 12 to 36 months. No single words by 16 months. We do not see them developing 2-word phrases at age 2. There's a continued lack of response to their name. They actually avoid eye contact, and they have lack of imitation. When you make a silly face, they do not imitate it. No feeding a baby doll at age 18 months, that pretend play. They have, they don't seem to do shared enjoyment. So if one baby's laughing, you will not see them join in. Obsessive interests like lining up toys, hand flapping, rocking, spinning. Truly, any sudden loss of language or social skill at any age is something that needs to be noted, okay? The best way to recognize atypical behavior is to know development stages and milestones. Snap a picture of this. Chart behavior to find triggers. Behavior is influenced and controlled by things that happen before the behavior and after the behavior. We have what happens before, then we have the behavior, and then what happens after. A, B, C. Take your camera out. What's the child trying to accomplish with his behavior? We have medical, where the child could have a medical issue, a toothache, headache. They can hit themselves to soothe the pain. It's like when we pinch ourselves. They may have a stomach ache, which leads to refusal to sit on the potty, a wide variety of conditions. If we know it is not a medical reason, then we go to escape. A child may be acting out to escape a distressing situation, get away from a loud sound. When they swipe food off of their plate, it just could be that they don't want to eat that food. They have a bad reaction to it and they don't know how to say it, so they swipe it. When a boy flops to the ground when it's time to do table work, he may be saying, hey, this work's too hard for me. I wish I had it written down because you might not be able to hear me, but being bad is better than being labeled stupid. So you will see lots of behaviors when someone's trying to not get labeled stupid. All children try to get attention. They show disruptive behaviors as a way to get another person's attention. A child may yell out during circle time because he has learned one teacher pulls him aside to talk, and then boom, he gets attention. Another child may flip chairs to get attention of his peers. Also, it could be sensory. All right, so it's not a real behavior. It's just that they are having sensory problems. Classroom methods for those diagnosed with ASD. Prompting and fading. All right, so this is a prompt is something that helps the child respond to a command. Fading is slowly removing those prompts. When you teach a new skill, you're going to fade your prompts when the child starts to learn. Then we have task analysis. Basically, the easiest way to do a task analysis is to do the skill yourself and then write down the steps as you're doing it. And that, then you would break it down, right? So this is a big one. All right, and then also remember, every teacher working with the child needs to be doing the exact same task analysis. All right, it's confusing for a child. Then we have that incidental teaching where basically it's just learning opportunities, adding words to the child's word, using higher vocabulary. We have to teach how they learn. Catch that child being good. If they don't receive enough positive attention for good behaviors, they're going to start doing things to get negative attention. When children attempt to get attention through misbehavior, the best thing we can do is not look, not scold, not notice at all, if it's not affecting anyone's health and safety. Remember, we're back to that child problem. Is it a child problem? Is it a teacher problem from our training? If you haven't watched it, or behavior management, please do, okay? It's Jennifer Ladd Heidel on YouTube, and it is behavior management and child problem versus teacher problem. A first then board. All right, so this is the first activity is less preferred, and the second is an activity that the child likes. First, we are going to do this, and then you get to do that. Visual schedules and social narratives, individualized stories that help children understand social situations. Okay, these are more resources. Take a pick. ADHD. There are many benefits to ADHD. Too many to list. It becomes a disadvantage when you're expected to conform to a structure that doesn't make sense to you. Everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing it's stupid. What's ADHD? Attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder. All right, we are very familiar with that. Inattention, hyperactivity. The inattentive type often becomes easily distracted by sights and sounds. Girls that do have ADHD most likely have the inattentive type. ADHD hyperactivity, that's fidgeting, blurting out answers. And then some have combined type, inattentive and hyperactive. Boys are most often diagnosed with ADHD than girls. And that's just because, guess what? Those characteristics are natural in boys. At the top of most fields, you will find an adult with ADHD. Their hyper curiosity and creativity will lead them to the top. Changes in the brain, just a little history. In the 30s, they were just born evil. In the 70s, it was a medical condition, okay? Women didn't get diagnosed though, because they were not hyperactive. But they're just labeled as dumb, which is so sad. On the contrary, they just need stimulation. Most women with ADHD are very bright in comparison to those without. What about that? Kennedy, you were very bright, my love. Even though sometimes we lose our car keys every day. No joke. She's one of the smartest kids in her school. She was top 2% in testing in the state of Tennessee, but yet she can't keep up with her car keys. Most research suggests that it's a neurobiological basis, okay? We get deficiencies in dopamine. They have a smaller right frontal cortex. And since ADHD runs in families, inheritance appears to be an important factor in 80% of cases. Signs and symptoms appear between age 3 and 12. Early onset of the hyperactivity impulse and combo come between the ages of 3 and 6. Inattentive type typically develops in middle school though. I've seen this. I have been like, what happened? We were so attentive and then all of a sudden it was like a light switch. Research estimated that anywhere between 20 and 35% outgrow the disorder. Okay, we have heard it. We've heard people fight against that and say, no, it's proven in 20 to 35%. Oh, this is great. Okay. Okay. They become hyper focused when they're under pressure. So cool. They do well in chaotic situations. They are going to set themselves up to be in a panic because guess what? Adrenaline is produced at that point. And guess what? Adrenaline is similar to those amphetamines that doctors give people for ADHD. They will deliberately and unconsciously wait until the last minute because the adrenaline gives them focus. I think that is so cool. So as you can see, we've got negative characteristic, but it's always followed up with positive. Hyperactive, energetic, intrusive, eager, can't stay on point, sees connections that others do not. Forgetful and disorganized, spontaneous, stubborn, persistent, moody, sensitive, impulsive, creative. Hard to not pay attention when somebody's looking you in the eye. Position these children in your sight. They respond well to touch. A touch on the shoulder, a pat on the back, or a hug. It shows positive effects. Use the children's name as you go through your lesson. If you call out the child's name who struggles with attention, they're going to make eye contact. Eye contact and personalization has positive effects. Never, ever take children's recess or free play. It's essential for them as water is for us. Exercise and stretching early in the morning. Provide options for musculoskeletal stimulation. In a previous training, we discussed how a 3 to 4-year-old's brain is saying to them, move, move, for survival purposes. It's to develop their underdeveloped muscles so that way they can fight a tiger. All right, it's within them. Throw in ADHD on top of that. These children physically cannot stay still. It pains them. Teachers are misinformed in that movement, even as little as bouncing or swaying. It's brain building, and it also involves the cerebellum, which is involved in child's focus. When we introduce new topics, we need to relate it to skills already mastered. Kids with ADHD overheat easily. So if you're introducing the letter A, relate it to something you have learned. It's like drawing a triangle. Break down tasks into small steps. And sometimes they can go through the entire day getting reprimands with no affirmation. Please notice and appreciate any little success. Really? Sometimes we have to do classroom accommodations. They can be taught in the regular classrooms, but there has to be adjustments to the environment. They may require special education services. This is a really smart thing that I learned and I didn't know. I wish I would have when I was trying to treat my kid. Medication at low doses helps with inattention. However, it must be given in higher doses to control impulse, okay? The medicines at this higher level can control the hyperactive part, but they no longer work for the inattentive, okay? Though medication is helpful for the attention part, behavior modification and therapy is the best treatment for the H. Oppositional defiant disorder. Children need love, especially when they do not deserve it. A pattern of angry, irritable mood. Unlike with conduct disorder, those with ODD are not aggressive towards people or animals. They don't destroy property and don't show a pattern of theft and deceit. It has links to ADHD, okay? And as much as 1/2 of the children with ODD were diagnosed as having ADHD as well. Conduct disorder. ODD, but with aggression or aggression. There's 2 types. Over aroused. They have reactive aggression, poor emotional control. They misinterpret social information. They distrust others, respond with aggression, and because of that insecure attachment style, that's why all this happens. They don't understand social consequences. Then we have under aroused. That's where we see a lack of empathy and appropriate feelings. They take what they want and feelings don't get in their way. They typically come from a background of disorganized, insecure attachment. Disorganized is where a parent beats you up in the morning and then cuddles and expresses their love in the evening. It's so sad. Where in the brain do we see changes? Altered cortisol activity. We have abnormal serotonin and noradrenaline. Punishments have a different effect on these kids. The brain causes them to respond differently to punishment, okay? So this can result in being less responsive to rewards and punishment. It just does not work with them. Many have the sensory integration problems too, okay? So that's kind of overlapping with what we learned about ASD. They also have an undeveloped prefrontal cortex, okay? Or it develops later. The when. Children show symptoms by 6 to 8, although it can emerge in younger children. They can last throughout the teen years, and they're diagnosed when it lasts for at least 6 months. The developmental theory suggests that the problems start when children are toddlers. They may have trouble learning to become independent from a parent or other main person to whom they are attached. Then you have that learning theory that says negative symptoms of ODD are learned attitudes. They mirror the effects of negative reinforcement methods that those parents are using. So this shows the events that can lead to ODD. Low income with high levels of stress, no food, access to shelter, physical abuse, or just that hostile parenting. It doesn't have to be hitting. Isolation and depression, marital discord, inconsistent discipline, slap then hug, teenage pregnancy, chemical dependency, and parents who provide very little cognition, the stimulation. They have frequent. Okay, so this is important. This is important. Okay. Many children tend to disobey, argue with parents, and defy authority. They may often behave this way when they're tired, hungry, or upset. But in children with ODD, the symptoms happen more often. They also interfere with learning and school adjustment. We see temper tantrums, argumentative with adults throughout the day, refusal to do what the adult asks, always questions rules, annoys and upsets others on purpose. And my boy does that, but only to Ella. Okay. So I know that he's not ODD because it's not for everyone. It's just for his little sister. So you got to think about these things. Blaming others for their misbehavior, easily annoyed by others, angry most of the time, speaks harshly, and seeks revenge, and being vindictive is the top priority for them. How can you help? Medication's not very useful. The most successful intervention is teacher training. The key to intervention with ODD is to establish a normal relationship that cannot be broken by deviant behavior. That unconditional caring from teachers. Probably the most important thing to take away. Don't argue with a defiant child. Say little or nothing. Follow child's angry statements with maybe, could be. Don't get angry from their anger. This teaches them nothing but shame, which just feeds their anger. Never say, I told you so. Set that defiant child up for success. It's probable that they have not experienced any type of positive reinforcement in their lives. Set up situations for them to explore and experience success, and then praise them. This is a cool one. Leave small notes or brief conversations. Hey, I've noticed how hard you are working to express your emotions in a positive way. This is a big deal. Let's continue helping. The protective factors that can help children beat the odds, the intelligence of the child, the resilience, and the temperament. But the community relationships with secure attachment, again, here we are. Trauma and ODD and all kinds of things can be overcome with the relationships with you. Teaching social interaction through role playing. That's a really effective thing. Teaching self-talk before they react. Reviewing classroom rules through the day, every day, and don't ask them to perform difficult tasks in front of other children. That really sets them off.
All this talk about obsessions and compulsions can be very confusing for kids. So in a way to kind of get them more involved in the treatment, we kind of take away the language and we put it more into a context that they can understand. So we'll often talk about OCD functioning like a bully inside their brain. If I come to you as a bully and I say, give me all your money or I'm going to push you down the stairs. If you're scared of me and you think that I'm capable of pushing you down the stairs, you're going to give me your money. And that's going to make me happy and it's going to make me go away. But tomorrow I'm going to come back for you because I know you're scared of me and I'm going to ask you for more. So the more you give, the more I take. And the more I take, the more I want. And that's exactly how OCD works. When the OCD says, wash your hands or line something up or seek reassurance about something, the more the child does that, it temporarily eases the anxiety, but it creates the need for more behaviors later. So it functions very similarly to a bully. And that's exactly how we talk
Ah,
about it. Parents in and having parents kind of talk about fighting the same bully. So it's not that we're helping your daughter, we're helping your son, it's that we're all working together to fight this bully and to get rid of this bully.
All right, that was supposed to be the leading video into obsessive compulsive disorder. This is the main thing to take away here is OCD is like having a bully stuck inside your head and no one else can see it. It goes from obsessing, then anxiety comes, then we do compulsions, and then we feel relief. It's a cycle. This is where a person has uncontrollable, reoccurring thoughts and behaviors. Not all rituals and behaviors are compulsive. If you find the statements below true, OCD is likely. I cannot stop the obsessive thoughts. I spend more than 1 hour a day being obsessive compulsive. Obsession and compulsion affects the quality of my daily life. Compulsions bring me short-lived relief. And my compulsive behavior never brings me pleasure, just relief. So it would be like I visualize a germ on my hands. Then I'm washing my hands so much they get raw. Fearing a loved one will be hurt. Calling repetitively, crying for parents a lot at school. Feces. Strict toileting routines, such as a certain wipe and wiping 12 times. Constant feelings you're going to mess things up, then you need constant feedback as your compulsion. The toys are out of place. I redo the black center on the shelf until they're perfect. We see a smaller left orbital cortex. We see decreased amygdala. There is an increase in volume of the prefrontal cortex. Large corpus callosum. Interior cortex shows overactivity, and that basal ganglia has lesions in OCD. So that's a lot of stuff. Know that the brain, again, there we go. It's stronger than a teacher saying, stop washing your hands, right? We just don't know for sure, okay? After brain injuries to the basal ganglia, the orbital front cortex, and the anterior cortex, we see onset patterns. We see changes in the brain, and we do not know why the changes happen, but we're either born that way, it's hereditary, it's major anxiety, growing up with an obsessive compulsive parent and guardian, or triggering events like moving, major illness. For children, it's age 9 for boys, age 11 for girls. Adults, 21 for men, 22 for women. As a parent, your instinct is to support and protect your child. OCD feeds on attention. If your child asks you to open a door to avoid coming in contact with the germs, you are inadvertently strengthening OCD each time you open that door. Your child's brain is learning that door handle is something to fear and cannot be handled by him. Think about something that scares you, all right? Going into a cage with a tiger. You're wanting to escape, all right? So that is what it can feel like for a child to be told that she needs to stop a ritual. We know anxiety all too well. We know the symptoms, the origins, but sometimes it's in disguise. Since you guys can't hear me, I'm going to sum up Britton's story. All right. Okay, I took this and I put it here. Okay. This is here. Don't argue with a brain glitch. Don't argue with chemicals. Don't argue with biology. Research in trauma debriefing shows no relief of symptoms to recall the trauma. Okay, but I'm going to sum this up right here. A child telling a therapist the past didn't show positive effects. Okay. With these children in our care, as well as children in general, we must be very aware of not giving these children a negative association with learning. Negative associations that happen in early childhood embed deeply. Preschool is our first experience with learning. Be aware that being negative at learning time very much leaves a lifelong learning repulsion. Do not use learning time as punishment. Do not use the absence of learning time as a reward. Don't condemn a child who cannot make the same amount of numbers or letters, even to another staff, when you think they are not listening.